The chilling 911 call was made by Officer Rebecca Martinez, a respected police officer in the Dallas, Texas police force. But this wasn't just another crime scene she had responded to. This was her own home. And the man she shot wasn't a stranger, a suspect, or a wanted criminal. It was her own father, Richard Martinez, a 62-year-old retired military veteran. What would drive a decorated officer to turn her service weapon on her own blood, firing not once but 5 times? The answer to that question is even more disturbing than the crime itself. Rebecca Martinez had dedicated her life to protecting others. At 36 years old, she was a respected officer in the Dallas Police Department with over a decade of experience. Known for her sharp instincts, dedication, and unwavering commitment to justice, Rebecca had always been the kind of cop people trusted. Born and raised in Texas, Rebecca grew up in what seemed like an ordinary, hard-working family. Her father, Richard Martinez, was a former military man, strict, disciplined, and deeply involved in shaping his daughter's life. Her mother, Maria, had passed away when Rebecca was just 14, leaving Richard as the sole parent. Despite the challenges of single fatherhood, he raised Rebecca with strong values, pushing her to pursue a career in law enforcement. Rebecca was an ambitious and determined young woman. After graduating from the police academy at 24, she quickly moved up the ranks, earning the respect of her colleagues. She was known for her ability to handle tough cases, particularly those involving domestic violence. Ironically, she had spent much of her career advocating for victims, never imagining that one day she'd be involved in one of the most horrifying cases of abuse imaginable. But Rebecca's most important role wasn't being a police officer. It was being a mother. She had Sophia when she was just 24 years old. The father was a brief relationship that didn't last, leaving Rebecca to raise her daughter on her own. Despite the challenges of being a single mom in law enforcement, she was devoted to Sophia, ensuring she had a safe, loving home. Or at least she thought she had. The reality of what had been happening in her own house, behind closed doors, was something she never saw coming. Richard Martinez was, by all appearances, a man of integrity. At 62 years old, he was a retired Army veteran who had served multiple deployments overseas. His years in the military had hardened him, but they had also earned him respect among his peers and his community. He was known as a no-nonsense, disciplined man, someone who valued order, respect, and tradition. When Maria, his wife, passed away from cancer, he poured all of his focus into raising Rebecca. To many he was the picture of a devoted father. He attended all of her school events, pushed her to succeed, and celebrated her milestones from graduating the police academy to becoming a mother herself. After retiring from the military, Richard moved in with Rebecca and Sophia, offering to help raise his granddaughter while Rebecca worked long shifts as a police officer. It seemed like the perfect arrangement, family taking care of family. But underneath the surface, there were shadows lurking that no one had ever questioned. While there had never been an official report against Richard, whispers and unease surrounded him in certain circles. Some distant relatives had once expressed concerns about the way he interacted with young girls in the family, but no one ever came forward with proof. To Rebecca, he was simply her father, the man who had raised her, the man who had supported her career, and the only grandparent Sophia had left. She never imagined that the man she had trusted most would betray her in the most horrifying way possible. At just 12 years old, Sophia Martinez was a bright and cheerful girl. She loved to draw, was passionate about animals, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She was a quiet, intelligent child, often described by her teachers as polite and well-mannered. But behind her sweet demeanor, Sophia had been carrying a dark secret, a secret too heavy for a child to bear. For months, maybe longer, she had been suffering in silence. The very person who was supposed to protect her, her own grandfather, had been hurting her. Like many victims of abuse, she was too scared to speak out. She didn't know how to tell her mother, the strong police officer who had always seemed unbreakable. She feared that if she did, no one would believe her. So she kept quiet, pretending everything was normal, until the night that changed everything. That night, when Rebecca came home early and walked into Sophia's room, the weight of silence was shattered. And Rebecca, the mother, the protector, the officer, reacted with the kind of rage that only a parent could understand. The Martinez family was like many others, seemingly normal on the surface but hiding wounds beneath. What made this case so shocking was not just the crime itself but the people involved. A decorated officer, a respected military veteran, and an innocent child caught in a nightmare. Richard Martinez had spent years building an image of a devoted father and grandfather. But behind closed doors he was a predator. Rebecca Martinez had spent years upholding the law, believing in justice. But in one moment, with a gun in her hand, she became judge, jury, and executioner. And Sofia Martinez, the little girl at the center of it all, would have to live with the trauma of what had been done to her, and what her mother had done in response. As this case unfolds, the questions become even more complicated. Did Rebecca act in self-defense, or was it an act of revenge? Should she be hailed as a hero or held accountable for taking justice into her own hands? And most hauntingly, could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had noticed the signs earlier? These are the questions that will follow this case, dividing opinions and shaking the foundation of what we think we know about justice, family, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her child. The night of the shooting was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Officer Rebecca Martinez had just finished her shift earlier than expected. It was a long day, filled with the usual stress of being a police officer, and all she wanted was to go home, take a shower, and spend some time with her 12-year-old daughter, Sofia Martinez. Her father, Richard Martinez, was home as usual. Since moving in with Rebecca to help with Sofia, he had taken on the role of caregiver whenever she worked late. To Rebecca, it had been a blessing, having her father there to watch over her daughter, ensuring she was safe while she was out protecting the city. But that night everything changed. Rebecca arrived home around 8:45 p.m. She parked in the driveway, noting how quiet the house seemed. Sofia was usually watching TV or doing her homework by this time. Richard often sat in the living room reading a book or watching old Western movies. As she stepped inside, something felt off. The house was dimly lit, and there was no sound of the television. No laughter. No usual, "Hi Mom" from Sofia. She set her gun and badge on the kitchen counter, walked toward the hallway and called out, "Sofia?" No response. A strange, sinking feeling settled in her stomach as she walked toward Sofia's bedroom. The door was closed, something that wasn't normal for her daughter, who often left it slightly ajar. A faint, muffled noise could be heard inside, but it was unclear what it was. Rebecca's instincts kicked in. Years of police work had trained her to sense when something wasn't right. She reached for the door handle, turned it slowly, and pushed the door open. And that's when she saw him. Richard Martinez, her own father, was standing over Sofia. His hands were in places they never should have been. Sofia's face was streaked with tears, her body frozen in fear. The world seemed to stop. The breath left Rebecca's lungs. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Then the silence broke. "Get away from her." Her voice was raw, filled with the kind of rage only a mother could understand. Richard turned to face her, his face twisted in shock. "Rebecca, listen." But she didn't listen. 5 shots fired. Everything that happened next unfolded in a blur. Rebecca reached for her service weapon, the very same gun she had placed on the counter minutes ago. Without thinking, without hesitation, she raised it. Bang! The first shot hit Richard in the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward. Bang! The second shot struck him in the chest. His mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. Bang! A third shot, a fourth, and finally, bang! The fifth. Richard collapsed onto the floor, his body convulsing for a brief moment before falling still. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the beige carpet. Sofia screamed. Rebecca stood frozen, her hands trembling as she lowered the gun. The sound of gunfire still echoed in her ears. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She had just shot her own father. The house was filled with an eerie silence, except for Sofia's sobs. Rebecca's body felt disconnected from her mind as she fumbled for her phone, dialing 911. 911 dispatcher. 911, what's your emergency? Her voice was hoarse, shaking. "I just shot him. I had to." He was hurting her. The dispatcher tried to keep her calm, but Rebecca barely heard the words. She looked down at her father's motionless body. The man she had once loved, respected, and trusted was now nothing more than a lifeless figure on the floor. A part of her wanted to feel guilt, but all she felt was rage. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the night. Blue and red lights flashed outside the house as officers rushed inside. Rebecca didn't resist. She placed her gun on the floor and raised her hands the moment they entered. "Drop the weapon," an officer shouted, though she had already surrendered. Her colleagues, men and women she had worked with for years, looked at her in shock. "It was my father," she whispered. "He was hurting my daughter. I had to do it." Sophia ran into the arms of a female officer, crying uncontrollably. The officers secured the scene, checking Richard's body for signs of life. But he was already gone. Rebecca was placed in handcuffs. Not because they wanted to treat her like a criminal, but because protocol demanded it. As she sat in the back of the patrol car, staring at her blood-stained hands, she knew life would never be the same again. The headlines would soon spread the shocking news across the country. A decorated officer, a respected veteran, a horrifying betrayal, and a crime that would divide the nation. What happened that night would spark a debate unlike any other. Was Rebecca Martinez a hero or a murderer? And more importantly, did she have any other choice? The aftermath of the shooting sent shockwaves through the community. Rebecca Martinez, once a respected officer of the law, now found herself on the other side of an investigation, this time as the suspect. After being placed in handcuffs, Rebecca was taken to the Dallas Police Department for questioning. Despite the emotional trauma of what had just occurred, she remained composed. She knew the legal process all too well. She had been in this position many times, but never as the one accused of a crime. Detectives immediately began processing the crime scene. Richard Martinez's body was removed from the house, and forensic specialists gathered evidence. Bullet casings were collected, blood spatter was analyzed, and most importantly, Sophia Martinez was taken in for a forensic interview. Sophia's testimony would be the most critical piece of evidence in determining whether her mother's actions were justified or criminal. Inside the interrogation room, Rebecca sat across from two detectives, one of whom she had worked with before. The room was tense. She knew what they needed from her, but she also knew that despite her badge, she wasn't immune to the law. "Tell us what happened," one detective said. Rebecca didn't hesitate. With a steady voice, she recounted everything. The moment she walked in, what she saw, and the instinctive rage that led her to fire 5 shots at her father. "I didn't think," she admitted. "I just reacted. He was hurting my daughter. I had to stop him." Her confession was straightforward. She didn't deny what she had done. But whether the law would see her actions as justifiable self-defense or murder was another question entirely. The case was handed over to the Dallas County District Attorney's Office, and prosecutors had a tough decision to make. On one hand, there was clear evidence of sexual abuse. Sophia's testimony, physical injuries, and forensic findings supported the claim that Richard had been assaulting her. On the other hand, Rebecca had fired 5 times, a level of force that some believed went beyond self-defense. The law required an assessment of whether her actions were reasonable and necessary at the moment she pulled the trigger. Would a jury see her as a mother protecting her child? Or as an officer who let her emotions take control? News of the case spread quickly, dividing public opinion. Some saw Rebecca as a hero, a mother who did what any parent would do to protect their child. Others questioned if her reaction was too extreme. Could she have restrained him instead? Should she have called the police instead of acting as judge, jury, and executioner? Ultimately, prosecutors decided to charge Rebecca with voluntary manslaughter, arguing that while her actions were driven by emotion, they went beyond immediate self-defense. If convicted, she could face up to 20 years in prison. The case was now in the hands of the legal system. Would justice see Rebecca as a mother who acted out of love, or as a police officer who broke the very laws she swore to uphold? The days following the shooting were a whirlwind of media coverage, legal battles, and emotional turmoil. The once private nightmare of the Martinez family had now become a national debate, one that raised questions about justice, morality, and the lengths a mother should go to protect her child. As news of Rebecca Martinez's arrest spread, the public reaction was intense. Supporters rallied behind her, calling for her immediate release. Social media erupted with hashtags like #JusticeForRebecca and #ProtectOurChildren, with many arguing that no mother should be punished for defending her child against a predator. At the same time, others, including some legal experts, questioned the use of excessive force. 5 shots, they pointed out. Was it self-defense or was it vengeance? Major news outlets ran the story for weeks, analyzing every detail. Rebecca was painted as both a heroic mother and a rogue officer who took justice into her own hands. The courtroom was now set for one of the most controversial trials in recent history. While the world debated Rebecca's fate, 12-year-old Sophia was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered innocence. The abuse she endured, coupled with witnessing her grandfather's violent death, left deep psychological scars. She was placed in the care of Child Protection Services while the case unfolded, undergoing extensive therapy to process her trauma. Despite everything, Sophia remained firm on one thing: her mother had saved her life. Months later, the trial began. The defense argued that Rebecca acted as any parent would in the face of imminent harm to their child. Prosecutors, however, claimed that as a trained police officer, she should have detained Richard rather than executing him on the spot. After weeks of testimony, including a powerful statement from Sophia, the jury deliberated. In a verdict that shook the nation, Rebecca was found not guilty of voluntary manslaughter. However, she was dismissed from the Dallas Police Department for violating the use of force policies. Rebecca was free, but life would never be the same. She lost her career, her father, and her sense of normalcy. But she never regretted her decision. Her only focus now was helping Sophia heal, and ensuring no one else had to suffer the way they did. For Rebecca, the real battle had only just begun. The case of Rebecca Martinez was one that ignited fierce debate across the nation. Was she a mother who did what was necessary to protect her daughter, or had she let vengeance override her duty as a police officer? In the end, the justice system sided with her, but the questions her actions raised would linger for years to come. For Sophia Martinez, the road to healing would be long. No child should ever have to endure the horrors she faced, nor should they have to witness such violence firsthand. With therapy, support, and time, she would learn to move forward, but the scars would always remain. Rebecca, once a decorated officer, found herself forced to leave behind the career she had dedicated her life to. But she didn't see herself as a victim. She had saved her daughter, and that was all that mattered. Though she had lost her badge, she gained something far more valuable: the chance to rebuild her life alongside Sophia, free from fear and abuse. The case also sparked a wider conversation about justice, morality, and the failures of the system. How many children suffered in silence just like Sophia? How many mothers wished they had the power to protect their children but felt powerless? Rebecca Martinez's story is one of pain, loss, and resilience. It is a stark reminder of how darkness can exist even within the walls of a family home, and how, sometimes, the only way to fight back is to take justice into your own hands. As the world moved on from the headlines, one thing remained clear: Rebecca had no regrets. And she never would. If you found this story compelling, there are many more shocking and untold family crime cases waiting to be exposed. The Family Crime Exposed is dedicated to bringing you true, raw, and thought-provoking stories that reveal the darkest secrets hidden within families. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Thumbs up like this video if you believe in justice and the power of truth. Speech Balloon, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think justice was served in this case? Loudspeakers, spread awareness by sharing this video with others. These stories deserve to be heard. Every family has secrets. Some are darker than others. Stay tuned as we continue to expose the hidden crimes behind closed doors.